Hi, I'm Paul Lazarovich, and welcome to Cranberry Country Journal. Since 1993, we've been bringing you a little slice of life of the people, places, and activities that make the Cranberry Country area a special place to call home. And I can't think of anyone more special than we have with us this evening in our opening segment. We're speaking with Marilyn Thayer. She's the first-time author of Middleborough Through the Ages, and it's published through local publisher, the Rock Village Publishing Company. But before we get to ask her some questions, you're probably going to say, where do I know her from? Well, if you had a child or in the Middleborough Public Library, you visited there, you certainly got to know the children's librarian, Marilyn, and I get to know her through her brown bag lunches and her costume carriage, and it's a delight to have you here.
And it's a pleasure to be here.
How's retirement working for you?
Retirement is very busy.
It sounds like you're busier than you were with the library. So, the book is, I have to be honest, I only waded through a couple of chapters, but it is on my reading list, and next week with vacation time I plan to read it. But it's a detailed 157 pages that really takes some sort of the beginning of time to what Middleborough is today. And what was the most difficult thing in putting this book together?
The hardest part of all was what to leave out.
Yeah. Spoken like a true author and researcher, but there's so much research involved.
Well, there's a lot of research, and if you think of the two Middleborough histories, the ones that are done by Weston and Romaine, they're over 1,000 pages, and they don't really even go back into native time.
Yeah.
So it was keeping in mind the focus that this is for students to use for research. And that's how I came to write it, because there really wasn't a great deal for students to use.
And also, I think it not only for students, but those who can't wade through the other volumes, which is very, very nice.
Yes.
You know, the book characters, the chapters specifically detail sort of the birth of Middleborough to where we are today. And there's some chapters including Nemaska to Middleborough. Middlebury, rather. We have the churches and the schools and the life in the 20th century. Was there one chapter in particular that really came alive for you when putting this book together?
I loved doing the chapter on the little people. And of course, you know that the little people are Mr. and Mrs. Tom Thumb and their adventures around the world, quite literally. Of course, they were married in New York, and
no, so there are some folks. Tell us how Tom became associated with Middleborough, Tom Thumb. Well,
Tom Thumb had been discovered by P.T. Barnum, and P.T. Barnum lived in Connecticut, as did Tom Thumb, Thomas Stratton actually, and they found P.T. Barnum found Mrs. Tom Thumb, who is Mrs. Bump, and he found her and thought it would be wonderful to have a couple of little people in his American Museum. And he had an American Museum in New York. And so that's how the two of them met. And there was another person, Commodore Nutt. And Commodore Nutt also was very attracted to Mrs. Bump. And so they ended up actually kind of competing for each other. And it was quite a while before they actually became married. But, so that's how he got associated, because she actually came from Middleborough. Her family came from Middleborough.
Probably one of our most well-known citizen couples, too, I guess.
I believe she is.
One thing we have to right away is that, you know, in terms of the Middleborough name, even today, you know, there's a spelling, is it O-U-G-H, is it O-R? But take us from perhaps the early time, from Nemaska to Middlebury to Middleborough.
Middlebury
if
to
you would.
Middleborough. Nemasket comes from native Algonquin terms. And I'm in trouble because I can't remember exactly what it means. And it is in the book. But it is named after the natives who lived in this area. So that's how Nemasket came about. And Nemasket was part of Plymouth for several years. And then in 1669, Plymouth Colony decided that Nemasket would become Middlebury. And perhaps it was because it was right in the middle between Plymouth and the area where the Pokanoket, who was the chief, the sachem, was Massasoit. So he was right on Mount Hope. So Middlebury was between. And then Middlebury through usage became Middleborough. And even today, people spell it O-R-O or
O-U-G-H.
O-U-G-H.
Yeah. But how about that possible connection through, was it Middlesbury in England?
Yes, there is a town named Middlesbrough in England. And there is the theory, too, that perhaps it's named after the English town.
You mentioned one of the chapters, and again, a reminder, folks, we're speaking with Marilyn Thayer. Marilyn is the first-time author of Middleborough Through the Ages. Before we talk more about the book, where can we get the book in the area?
You can get the book at the Middleborough Public Library. You can get it at Maria's Hallmark, which is in Middleborough, and you can also get it at Nature's Pantry in Lakeville.
And I happen to have a signed copy too, folks, so I know Marilyn is very accommodating in terms of signing it for you. Let's look at one of the chapters, maybe the life in the 20th century, the 1900s.
Yes.
If we were to look at some old pictures of Middleborough, downtown Middleborough, and in the 1900s, and look at Middleborough today, what will we see that we could recognize?
Well, Maria's Hallmark. That, if you look very carefully at it, it says Pierce on it, and that's considered the Pierce building. And so that was there, the bank building across the street from.
Always a bank?
I believe it was always a bank.
Yep.
That's always been the bank building.
Yeah.
So those two are there. There is the store at the corner of, the first block, opposite the post office.
Okay, yep.
Yep. Now the post office in the early 1900s was not there. Pierce Academy was there, and sadly it was torn down.
And the Pierce name has been obviously associated with the town through years, and still even today. Tell us about that connection.
Well, the Pierces actually started out in Lakeville. It was Abel Pierce, and even before him, his father started out in Lakeville, and then they ended up doing the bank and the bank building. He started a general store in that area. They also lived in Mortontown. Mortontown was just the Lakeville side of Route 28. That was considered Mortontown. And they lived in that area for a while. And Peter Pierce, there's Colonel, they became Colonel, and there's Major Levi Pierce, and they were brothers. And gradually their fortune was made. They had a store, the Pierce store, which is now the Middleborough Police Station. Yes. Yep. And they donated the money for the Middleborough Public Library. They donated both the money and the land. The land was the squash court, where they grew squashes. And when I first heard that, I thought, squash court, they played squash.
That was my first reaction to it.
No, they grew squash to sell in the store across the street.
And how did the Pierce Trust come about? I mean, was that just as a result of the wealth earned by the Pierce family? And
he left the money to the town. It's a trust that he left to the town.
And just recently, I think we have Rob DeRozier has been added as the new trustee, I think, by the way.
Okay.
So,
no, and I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just learned that today, Marilyn, actually. Tell us about another chapter. You talk about some of the churches, and if anything, I think if a person who comes to Middleborough first time, you're just taken aback, I think, by the many churches.
Oh, and they're beautiful.
They certainly are beautiful.
They really are beautiful churches.
Talk about some of the churches that you see in town.
Well, there's the Episcopal Church, which is right on the corner, and that was made possible by the Pierce. Again, Pierces went to the Episcopal Church. The Unitarian Universalist Church was actually moved there. It didn't start out on the corner of South Main Street. South Main Street and that little street that goes up by the town hall. It didn't start out there. It was actually moved. The piece of property was given to the Unitarian Universalist Society. The very first church, Church on the Green. Yeah. In fact, I think it's very interesting that the center of Middleborough initially, back in the 1600s, started with the Church on the Green. It wasn't in South Main Street and Center Street. And the Sproat Tavern was very central to the Church on the Green.
Tell us about the Sproat Tavern, if you will.
Sproat Tavern was the way station. It was right, Plymouth Street ran from Plymouth to Taunton, and that was the main road. And Sproat Tavern was there, Church on the Green was there. Sproat Tavern, initially they started out having town meeting there before
A town hall, was it?
before town hall, yeah.
And it had some
Before the early
famous
town hall.
visitors, a certain
Benjamin
president.
Franklin, yes. George Washington,
George Washington.
visited Sproat Tavern. Benjamin Franklin actually lectured on agriculture and talked about agriculture to citizens at Sproat Tavern, to Middleborough citizens at Sproat Tavern.
That's all fascinating. I know because of time we're going to coming up on time, but again, a reminder, we're speaking with Marilyn Thayer. She's the author of Middleborough Through the Ages. You can get it, it's available here throughout the Middleborough and Cranberry Country area, also available in the local libraries. Give us some interesting facts or maybe some things people may not know about the town or just recently moved to the town.
Oh my goodness.
Putting you on the spot, Marilyn, I know. So.
Well, I was thinking of the trolleys too. I mean, we had trolleys running through Middleborough, and they were quite extensive.
Where did the trolleys go?
Trolleys went from Brockton.
Brockton, yeah.
Brockton down Taunton, Plymouth. I believe there was. No, I'm not sure about that one, but Brockton, Plymouth, went down to Lakeville.
How about an old movie theater? People who come to town wanted to. There had to be a theater.
Oh
in
yes,
this
of
town.
course there was. Right opposite where Town Hall is now, there was a wonderful theater, a movie theater, and I have a feeling that was probably. I don't know whether that was torn down at the time of. But at any rate, it's no longer here, which is sad. We have, and that is something that, in my research, I've discovered the loss of a lot of wonderful, wonderful buildings.
Give us some examples. I don't know.
Well, Sproat Tavern, Pierce Academy, which the post office took that over. There was the Martinique, which was now the parking lot of the Middleborough Public Library. That was a wonderful home. It's sad. Oh, the other thing I have to finish up with, steamboats. Can you imagine a 100-foot steamboat running up and down the Nemasket River?
Was it a steamboat for pleasure, or did you?
No, it was a steamboat for pleasure.
Yeah.
People would, Wareham Street, they would, the bridge that went over the Nemasket River, you could get the steamboat and you could go up, and they would go up to Assawamsett Pond. And it was a pleasure cruise, and they had there were places where they had to hinge the pipe, the steam pipe, so that it could drop down for it to go under bridges, and they had to pole in a couple of different places, but a 100-foot steamboat running
Marilyn,
up and down
you're
the
making us
Nemasket.
want to go back in time. So just one last thing. If I know you have this geared to all ages, but kids in particular, your youngsters in particular.
Yes.
If there's one thing you'd like to get across to them through publishing this book, some child that's sitting maybe in the Berkland School today, and what is it that you want to impart with them?
Well, learn about history. If you want to write a book, anybody can write a book.
I'll disagree with you, Marilyn. You have to have patience.
You do have to have patience, I have to admit. But if you have the patience and the stick-to-itiveness, you can work on
and the
a book.
zest and the interest that you have, too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for being on the program.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Speaking with Marilyn Thayer, and again, first-time author of Middleborough Through the Ages, folks, and I promise I'm going to finish reading it when I speak with you again. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but hopefully it'll be soon. Yes. We're going to continue with Cranberry Country Journal, coming to you from the Lakeville Public Library, as we continue with our interviews with local and area authors. We'll be right back.
Can you consent with me? Imagine what you'd see if every child had a book to read.
So the mission is for us to get a book to each and every child.
So let's join hands, book people unite, unearth hidden passion. Come on, we'll have a good time. One book can be the first thing that helps to change a life. People unite.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
I look up to a lot of the older heads, the innovators, the heads of the art movements of the past. they kept it really edgy and like a lot of the Latin American muralists and Latin American artists, and their styles were very unique and new to their time. You know, somewhat controversial, but that's who I look up to mainly. Personally, I'm very excited about going to college. It's something new and it's something different than what I'm used to. I'm definitely going to be a little out of my element, but that's what makes it so exciting, is that, you know, it's something fresh. Well, there's so many opportunities that I think I could miss out on if I didn't go, you know? Getting into college takes planning and vision. You know, it's just like when I take a brick wall and turn it into a canvas for my art. Paintings help me realize that I've got what it takes.
Welcome back to Cranberry Country Journal. I'm your host, Paul Lazarovich, and I'm delighted to introduce you to two more local authors. Sitting to my right, we have Tom Ciriginano, the recent author of 67 Cents, and also to my immediate right, we have Joyce Walsh, author of a number of books, including her recent sleuth blog. So welcome to the program.
Thank you, Paul.
This is sort of a crime interview, right?
Yes, it is.
Let's talk with Tom, because right off the bat, Tom, having had a chance to speak with you about The Constant Outsider, nicely set in South Boston in the 70s in the turbulent time. You were the good guy in that book.
Yep.
This book, you're the bad guy. Tell us about it.
In the first book, I'm a good guy.
Yep.
And the second book, I explore what the bad guy that would have become me if I had taken all the opportunities that came my way, what would have happened. So that's actually why I wrote the second book, because I was curious to see, you know, what would have happened if I had actually done what they asked me to do.
And tell us about some of those things you did in the second book. The first
in the
book,
second
you
book.
were a nice guy.
Well, people are going to read the second book and they're going to wonder which one is the true story, you know?
Yeah.
But because I weave a lot of the stories from the first book into the second book, which is the mob guy I'm working on his car, and all of a sudden he hits me with the idea that, hey, you know, I was asked to see if you want to hold some high-stakes card games in your back room. And I'm saying, I know who he works for, you know, and I says, well, really? He says, yeah, you'd get 10% of every pot. And it doesn't matter who wins or loses. He said, I guarantee there won't be no trouble, right?
Easy money.
Yeah. He says, all you have to do is supply the table, chairs, and some booze and, you know, refreshments. And it would have been heavy hitters only, he said. And I almost blurted out, yeah, that sounds good. I was 22 years old, 26 years old, whatever. Yeah. Sounded good to me. And I said, let me think about it overnight. But anyway, in the second book, I say yes to that offer.
And I'm glad you did, because it weaves some delightful tales. So tell us about,
Yes, it does.
it was sort of a conflict between the Irish mafia and the Italian mafia too. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think my observations were that the west side of Southie was operated by Whitey Bulger and his people. And the east side had a long history of being controlled by the Italian mafia and having them as gas customers. I had them all coming in. You know, that's the nice thing about having a gas station. Everybody needs gas. Doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a lawyer or a killer. You know, and I got to know them all, and you never know who was going to pull up next. And a lot of them would like to hang out at the shop and have a beer with me and stuff too. So
We don't want to give away the ending, but how about tell us what went into the title 67 Cents, because it's a great title.
Okay, yeah. In the first book, you might remember that the mob got wind that I was having trouble with this particular person, and I'm not going to say what I did, but anyway, it wasn't good. And
you have to buy the book, folks.
actually,
you have to read the book.
I mean, I wasn't completely innocent, but I wasn't about to have anybody killed, let's put it that way. But they came in and they says, hey, Tom, I heard you hired somebody to go after your this guy, you know, and get your money back from this guy. And I said, yeah. And I'm talking to a guy that's a known mobster that never spoke to me hardly before this, just pulls in for gas all the time. And he says, call your guy off. And I said, why should I call my guy off? He says, he puts his hand out, he says, give me 67 cents. I says, what do you want 67 cents for? I can just relive it, just like it happened yesterday. Because when he said, you buy the bullet, and he said the guy's name is history. He says, so-and-so is history. And I said, he's offering to kill the guy for me, right? All I had to do was just hand him 67 cents to buy the bullet. But of course, that's the same as paying them to kill somebody. And once you do that, the mob's got you.
Yeah, you're forever in their throats.
You can't say no to storing hijacked trucks for them anymore. You can't say no to the card games. You can't say no to anything because they own you.
Now, in the first book, The Constant Outsider, you did say no.
Yeah, I did.
But this is your chance to see what the
Right.
bad Tom would be like.
Exactly.
We're going to speak to Joyce in a moment. She has a trilogy. You think this? We have a third book coming as part of a trilogy, Tom?
Well, there's a possibility, but not right away.
Yeah.
I'm doing audio books right now of the 2 books, and they should be out in the next few months.
Looking forward to those. And tell the folks how we can get copies of the
Oh.
books. Again, the books are The Constant Outsider and 67 Cents, Confessions of a Killer. How could someone in the area purchase the
Well,
books?
you can certainly go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any of the online retailers. They're on Kindle also. And you can go to my website at theconstantoutsider.com and order a signed copy as a gift for somebody if you want to.
That's nice. And now we're going to just change, not subject a bit, we're still going to be in this crime motif, folks. But
I just have to make a comment on
Oh,
Tom's
sure.
book. It's so fascinating to read how wrong decision leads you to wrong decision. You just follow, as a reader, follow right down that path. And it's so authentic. It's a wonderful read.
Well, that gives us an introduction to a person who got to interview a number of people who made some wrong decisions too. We have Joyce Walsh, and she's going to tell us about her new book called Sleuth Blog. You may know Joyce. She has a number of books out, in fact, 6 in total, I believe,
That's
correct?
right.
Including a trilogy. Tell us the name of that series.
The trilogy is the Pitsley County Chronicles, which takes place here in southeastern Massachusetts, and it's comprised of Juckets, Swamp Yankees, and Bogmen. The other 2 are mysteries also. The only nonfiction is Sleuth Blog.
Is the
All
new
of the
one,
others are
yeah.
fiction.
Yeah, so let's start right off and talk about Sleuth Blog, because it's a blog. You wrote in a blog style.
Well, I did. I didn't realize I was writing it in a blog style. It started out as just a journal of what I did to investigate a murder that occurred in Fall River in 1969. And as I went along, I treated it as a diary. And so I wrote down what was happening to me on a daily basis. And then I was thinking about the era, and so it became historical. There's a lot of research involved. But generally, it's the narrative of how I followed along this investigation, the things that I did right and the things that I did wrong, the people that helped me and those who didn't. And I didn't know, the reader will follow along with me, it's unedited in that way.
Yeah.
I did not know if I would come to a conclusion and have a book to print, and I was prepared for the fact that it might not occur.
So give us some insight. Tell us about this cold case murder case that you decided to delve into in the over 2 years of research and dealing with the mob and police officers and the
Oh,
like.
yes. Well, Russell Goldstein is the victim. He was an antiques dealer, a gun dealer, coin collector, and he was very notable in that era from Boston to Providence and beyond, because on his antique side, he was selling to very high-end customers as well as guns to anybody who would buy them. And then one night, he was found dead, shot to death in his apartment. And a friend of my husband's, who is also a friend of mine, told me one day, I know who did it. No one had ever been convicted of the crime. And so that was very tantalizing. I was reluctant because I knew this was going to, a cold case 40 years ago. I don't know Fall River. I didn't know the victim. What do I care about this? But it drew me in, and I just couldn't let it go. Once I got my teeth into it, I had to find out, could I identify the killer? And I believe I did.
Now, like Tom, who had to deal with some underworld figures, including a Mr. Bulger, I think was his name, you had to deal with some mobsters also and interview them. That had to be terrifying in some respects.
Well, I didn't actually ever get to interview all the mobsters. I interviewed the family of one of them.
That's close enough.
That's close
Yeah,
enough. Well,
yeah.
and that ended rather sadly because I had great sympathy for the family. But I think they saw me as, in a way, a betrayal because I wrote about them, even though I was sympathetic to them. I encountered lots of detours around trying to get information. There were people who just stonewalled me. Some people
Police.
who actually lied to me, exactly. And most of it was just digging. It was a lot of digging. And I happen to love research. So that was, it was fun for me, and it certainly brought me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah. And it's also a different kind of book, Joyce, in that you're exploring your own self in this. Tell us,
Absolutely.
how did that get intertwined in?
I'm not sure.
Well, I just read that. Can I speak for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Please.
I just read that. And I'm the type that reads 5 or 6 pages and falls asleep at night. Well, I read that in 3 nights until 2 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you.
It's really
Thank
amazing.
you.
That's a great compliment.
The amount of research that went into that book is just phenomenal, and it's really scary to think what went on in that case.
Yes, yes,
And
and that era of Fall River was like
And
Dodge
we got to
City.
be thankful we live in this era and not under, I'm
Exactly.
not going to say anymore, but
Right.
it's like 3 books in one. It is actually a diary.
Yes.
It's an investigation that's real.
Yes.
And it's also a history lesson.
It is, and that either appeals to people or doesn't. For
I
people
loved
who
it.
want
I loved
just straight investigative journalism, that's not what you get. You do get a lot of my flavor in it.
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit about the author too, so I think I'll enjoy reading it too. We're speaking with Tom Ciriginano. He's the author of The Constant Outsider and his recent book, 67 Cents, Confessions of a Killer, and Joyce Walsh of Sleuth Blog. I'll say Sleuth Blog fame for the both of you. We have just a few minutes, but both local authors and well-known in the area. Some advice to someone out there watching that's wondering, I'd like to publish and write a book, and just a local person. How did you go about doing it? I mean, we can do an hour show on that
we
alone.
could.
Yeah, you
but
could.
We could.
Yeah.
I'll just comment a
Please.
little bit about the publishing process. All of mine have been published by independent publishers. They've not been at least initially self-published. At this stage of my life, I never thought I would say this. I would never go to an independent publisher again. I would self-publish.
Right.
The time involved, you'll notice that that book ends at 2011. It wasn't published until August, September of 2012. That's the length of time it takes. I have no control over the pricing. My royalties are minuscule. So self-publishing gives you a lot more freedom. And as far as quality is concerned, you get a mixed bag whether you go through a real publisher
Yeah.
or self-publishing.
I don't see any difference between the quality of a best-selling novel and one that's self-published.
And you like the idea, Tom, keeping that control too, as Joyce
Oh, I
had
love the
mentioned?
control.
Yeah.
You can control pricing, marketing.
Yep.
You can control everything.
You have to do your own marketing anyway, whether it's self-published by a publisher or whether you self-publish.
One thing that you can give just a piece of advice, maybe something you've changed your mind about in terms of self-publishing, or maybe a misnomer you may have had. Anything, last piece of advice to someone out there saying, I've got a book, I want to self-publish it, but
I have one.
yeah, please.
One thing is, I would say, pick the right subject. That is a very important thing. You want a subject that's going to attract more than just one little neighborhood or one little community, something that's going to really get the juices flowing. And you know, in my case, I just happened to be in South Boston at a time when history was being made.
Yeah.
And to me, it was normal at the time. Now I find out not everybody had these things happen to them. And with what Joyce writes about, it's history around the neighborhood too, the area.
And I'll just give a little plug for a writers group that I belong to and co-founded, Authors Without Borders. If you go to awd6.com, you'll find that we give workshops on writing, publishing, and promoting, and we really feel a very strong incentive to help aspiring writers.
But just before we go, Tom, a website where folks can reach you and learn more about your books?
TheConstantOutsider.com, very easy.
And Joyce?
JoyceWalsh.com.
Take it easy,
That's a
man.
tough one.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Paul.
This concludes this issue of Cranberry Country Journal. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with some local authors. If you have a suggestion for a topic, a guest, or even a co-host, shoot me an email at cranberrycountry@hotmail.com. If you want to use snail mail, it's also fine. You can reach me via the mail at Cranberry Country, Post Office Box 1235, Middleborough, Mass. 02346. Either way, I'll promise I'll get back to you. In the meantime, keep that Cranberry Country spirit in your heart. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.